So here with Ruby, we're gonna do some collar conditioning. So I just got the collar here. I'm just gonna put it on and tighten up the drawstrings. Make sure that's really under the fur there. Make sure the box is nice and snug. And then we're just gonna tuck in these ends. Okay, make sure the hair is kind of parted underneath. So there, so we've got that e-collar on. And we've been working on just the sit with eye contact and the release command, right? So let's practice that a little bit before we incorporate the e-collar. Ruby, sit. No, sit. No, sit. Good. Break. Good girl. Do a couple more to get her into a rhythm. Sit. Good. Break. Good. It's really windy outside, which is why we're inside today. I tried doing it outside, but it wasn't working. And we got our Christmas lights, putting those up today, which is why they're everywhere. Sit. Do one more. Waiting for eye contact. Good, good. All right, so now we're going to try and find the working level on the collar, and this is part of the conditioning. So what I'm going to do, I just turned the light on there. I'm going to start at off. I'm going to start at 1, give it a few taps, go to 2, give it a few taps until I get some kind of response. And normally we're up to like probably 8 or 10. Before we see a response. You can see the light going there. So what I'm looking for is, sometimes they'll kind of look behind them because it feels kind of itchy. Sometimes they'll flick that ear that the receiver is next to. And sometimes you really don't get a response. All the dogs are kind of different. So I can actually see her ear moving. See her pawing there? I can actually see her ear moving. This is an 8, so this isn't high, but do you see that? She definitely feels that. So we're on an 8, and I'm actually gonna go down, start going down. Because to me, that was kind of a dramatic 7. So we don't get that dramatic pulse with the 7, but I'm gonna start there because I think she feels the 7. And 7's a good number to start. We've got the comfort pad on there, so it's going to reduce the stim by about 25%, right? So this time when I ask her to sit, I'm going to press and hold the black S. As soon as she sits, I'm going to release the button, okay? This is how we're going to condition the collar. And we're just going to go back to with the food, break with the food. Sit. Good. Break. Good girl. Good girl. Ruby. Sit. Good. It's very windy. Break. Good girl. Good girl, Ruby. Ruby, sit. Good. So her looking behind like that, that's a pretty obvious sign that she feels that. Not in an uncomfortable way, just in a feeling way. Great. Good. Sometimes I think she's looking at me, but the hair's in the way, so she has to move her head up. Sit. Good. Sit. Good. So I'm actually going to go down to a 6 because I feel like the response at 7, even though she doesn't seem uncomfortable, it's a pretty obvious response. And it shouldn't be that obvious. Hey, sit. You can tell she's not uncomfortable. Great. Good girl. Good girl. just held the collar the entire time. I was going to add a bit of leash pressure, but I was a little bit late. Break. Good. Good girl. I'm actually going to go back up to a 7 because that might be the lowest number that she feels. Hey. Sit. Sit. Good. She definitely feels that, but I don't know if she was feeling the 6, so I feel like 7 might be our number. Break. Yeah. You can tell she's not uncomfortable. It feels like a TENS machine, so if you've ever used a TENS machine kind of on the first level that you feel, it's not uncomfortable, it's just a sensation, right? So with this conditioning, we're giving that sensation meaning, right? Ooh, good girl. Ready? Sit. Yes. Sit. Sit. Break. Good girl. Yes. It's important that when you're doing this that you don't let them get the food, even if you do have to do kind of a dramatic pull like I did there, because if they get the food once, you're kind of reinforcing that, right? That's it. So I can put her back in one. Ruby, sit. Good. Break. Good girl. Good girl. Ruby, sit. So I'm not going to stop applying pressure with the collar. Sit. Good. But they often will scratch because it does feel like an insect. Great. Good girl. Good. It does feel like an insect. And oftentimes when people notice their dog scratching, they'll let go of the remote, let go of the collar pressure, which is the wrong thing. Because then you're teaching your dog to scratch to turn off that pressure, right? And you end up with a lot of dogs who feel the collar and then they'll scratch just because they know that that turns it off. So it's important to just kind of work through that scratching on a low level, which is why we're using the lowest level that she feels. Hey. Sit. Good. Break. Good. The other thing you can do, and I just did it there, is instead of holding it the entire time, if you feel like your dog is a little bit sensitive and you're kind of in between levels, you can tap, 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 tap. And then as soon as they sit, stop tapping. So that's what I'm going to start doing because I feel like she's kind of in between that 6 and 7. Sit. Good. Break. Good girl. Ruby, sit. Good. Great. Good. You hear that dog barking out there? So this is pretty much it. We're going to do this to varying degrees for the next couple of days. We'll probably make this sit a little bit more complicated. We'll add duration and distractions. And then the next thing we'll probably start as place, just because that's really easy for most dogs. Sit. Good. Great. Good. You have to take your time with this part of it, learning about the collar kind of before you dial up. And sometimes you'll start on a number, and as the dog gets used to it, that number will fall back a little bit, which just comes with experience. And sometimes the dogs will show kind of no sign that they're feeling it. And if they do, I kind of will always start kind of around an 8 to 10, depending on the size of the dog and the breed of the dog, because some breeds are more sensitive than others. I kind of start at an 8-10 and then just start training and see how the dog responds, right? If you're getting a really obvious response, a really obvious ear flick or a muscle move, then I would try to go down. And if you do go down and you're not getting a response, then just move to the tapping. We'll do a couple more. Ruby, sit. Good. And that was a really good example of her just kind of standing still when you're asking them to sit. And sometimes they will, and it's just because they're feeling that collar pressure and they're kind of thinking about that and what meaning to attach that. I asked her to sit and she just kind of stood there. I could tell she was feeling the collar, and I tap, tap, tap the collar. And then as soon as she sat, I released the collar. But if that goes on for too long, just kind of help them with the leash. Just add a little bit of leash pressure so you're kind of meshing the leash pressure with the collar pressure, right? Ruby, sit. Do it again. Good. Good. Break. Good. We'll do one last one. This one I'm going to do a little bit longer just to show you what to do, because I am going to use the collar, the e-collar, if she gets out of the sit. So I've been doing pretty easy ones, pretty fast ones. So let's just try and do a little bit of a hard one. Sit. Good. Gonna drop the food. Good. 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 Looking back at the food, looking back at me. Good. Good. Good girl, Ruby. Sit. Good. Break. Good. Just like that. So she's already picking up what that collar pressure means, because I didn't even use the leash. As soon as she got up, I used my verbal negative marker, asked her to sit again, and I just got time to tap the collar twice, and she immediately felt it and went right back into that sit. Ruby, sit. Tap, tap, tap. Good. Break. Yes. Good girl. Good girl. We'll do one more. One more happy one. You always want to end your training on a happy note or a fun note for the dog. Sit. Good. Break. Yes. So that they remember that next time. Next time you're in a training situation, the dogs are excited, they're happy, they start seeing the equipment coming out, they're getting happy. You don't want to end it on a note where the dog's confused or they're frustrated or you're frustrated. So always, if you're trying to progress and you're going too fast and the dog doesn't understand, or you're not understanding what the dog is trying to say to you, always take it back a few steps before you end. And just end it on a couple of good, successful, perfect ones, right? That's always where you want to end it. You did so good. You did so good. So we'll probably do more of this tomorrow. And then we'll introduce place probably tomorrow with the collar. And I'll show you how to transition from this conditioning into just using the collar every day. Because obviously we're not going to press it every time we give the dog a command. That's only the conditioning process, and you only want to layer it over commands that the dog already knows. We already been doing this for a few days, so she's very familiar with that. We'll do one more. Ruby. Ruby, sit. Good. Break. Good girl. Good girl, Ruby. Girl. All right, we'll check back in tomorrow.